Imagine you're sleeping. Suddenly, in the dead of night, a sound sends a tremor through your chest. You think it's a dream, but the sound comes again. Dong. This time you realize it's ringing for you. This bell doesn't make mistakes. It doesn't lose its way. It waits. And when it rings, no lock, no prayer, no scream can save you.
Tucked away in the rugged northeast of the United States, hidden between jagged peaks and suffocating pine forests, lies the village of Ravenhill. The nearest city is 50 miles away, but it might as well be on another planet. When dusk falls here, the silence isn't peaceful, it's heavy. It feels like a dead zone, severed from the rest of the world. At the edge of town sits a rusted metal sign, "Welcome to Ravenhill." Beneath the faded paint, someone long ago scratched a warning, "Pray before nightfall." By day, the village is merely eerie. Weather-beaten wooden houses, an abandoned gas station, and the charred skeleton of a church that burned down a century ago. But when night falls, the wind itself seems to whisper a warning. Something is wrong here. It was the last week of November, a moonless night. Fog began to swallow the roads, inch by inch. From the depths of the woods came a strange, dry, scratching sound. Exactly midnight. Suddenly, bong! A deep, metallic tolling shattered the silence. The vibration was so violent it rattled the window panes in their frames. Birds erupted from the trees in a frantic swarm. Dogs began to howl, not at the noise, but at something hidden within the frequency that the human ear couldn't quite catch. Old Man Harold bolted upright in his chair. "That's not the church bell," he whispered, his voice trembling. He knew because Ravenhill has no bell. The old church burned to the ground 100 years ago. Then it came again. Bong! Closer this time, heavier, like the sound was vibrating inside their very chests. One by one, the streetlights flickered and died. The village plunged into total darkness. Jake, the youngest of the Miller family, peered through a crack in the curtains. Deep in the mist, he saw it, a tall, dark silhouette, moving, closing in. Something heavy was hanging from its hand. Then came the third strike. Bong! This time the earth shuddered. Standing in the middle of the road was a towering figure. No face, only the heavy folds of a black cloak and a massive bronze bell held in a claw-like grip. The air turned ice cold. The figure slowly raised its head, as if it knew the entire village was watching from behind locked doors. It raised the bell once more. But before it could strike, the world went silent. No birds, no dogs, no wind. Ravenhill realized then this was just the beginning. As the shadow waited, a whisper echoed off the mountainside like a dying breath. The reckoning of sins has begun. The night was still deep. Inside every house in Ravenhill, people held their breath. Some prayed in frantic whispers. Others bolted their doors, clutching the edges of their curtains with trembling hands. The dark figure standing in the middle of the road began to move, slowly, mechanically. Bong! The sound of the bell was heavier now. It didn't just hit the ears, it vibrated inside the marrow of their bones. Inside the Miller home, the lights flickered once and died. Mrs. Miller pulled her son close, whispering into his hair, "It's okay. It's going to be okay." Then a soft tap came at the door. Not a knock, but the sound of cold metal scraping against old wood. Scritch, scritch. Thick black smoke began to curl under the doorframe. The temperature plummeted, turning their breath into white mist. On the walls, framed photos began to shatter, hitting the floor one by one. Crash! The door didn't just open, it splintered inward. Nothing was visible in the doorway, yet something invisible was pacing in the center of the room. The air grew thick, suffocating. Jake tried to scream, but no sound came out. His voice had been stolen by the cold. Suddenly, an unseen force seized his father, lifting him like a rag doll and slamming him against the wall. The white wallpaper bloomed with a sudden dark crimson. Mrs. Miller tried to run with her son, but she froze, her eyes widening in pure primal terror. The figure manifested in the center of the room, a towering black shroud, and from the massive bronze bell in its hand, blood began to drip, slowly, thickly. Bong! With the strike of the bell, the Millers collapsed to the floor. Silence reclaimed the house. The next morning, the sun rose, but the air in Ravenhill remained heavy, stagnant. The villagers gathered outside the Miller house, their faces pale. The front door hung on a single hinge. Inside, the house was a ruin, furniture smashed, walls stained with gore. But the bodies, they lay in unnatural positions, eyes wide open, faces twisted into masks of eternal agony. And in the center of the wall, painted in fresh blood, was a symbol, a bell. Old Man Harold leaned on his cane and hissed, "It has begun." Before he could finish, a faint metallic sound drifted from the distant woods, very soft, very far away. Ding. The village understood then. The bell wasn't just a sound, it was an announcement. Would it be another house tonight and the night after? A fear settled over Ravenhill that no one could name, though in their hearts they all called it by the same word, the death knell.
Ravenhill was no longer the same after the slaughter of the Miller family. On the maps of the United States, this tiny village still existed, but in reality, the world had forgotten it. Calls were made to the nearest city, but the lines offered nothing but static. Mobile networks were dead. It was as if an invisible wall had sliced the village away from existence. That evening, the survivors gathered before the charred skeleton of the old church. Some shouted about serial killers, others whispered about demons, but one voice rose above the rest. The bell has returned. Old Martha's voice trembled like a dry leaf. My grandmother used to say, 100 years ago, the bell would call to the people, and those who answered never came back. No one wanted to believe her, but in everyone's eyes, the same question burned. Whose house is next? The second night. The village plunged into darkness long before midnight. No one dared to light a candle, hoping that if they stayed hidden in the shadows, the shadow wouldn't find them. The clock struck 12.
Bong! The strike was so violent that windows across the village shattered into crystalline shards. The air turned into liquid ice. This time, the target was Harold's house. He was alone, clutching a shotgun by the window. As the bell tolled, the shadows on his walls began to stretch, growing long and jagged. They were moving. They were alive. Without a door opening, a black mist began to bleed through the floorboards. Harold fired his gun. Blam! But the lead vanished into the fog without a sound. Then he saw it, standing in the center of his living room, faceless, eyeless, a void of pure darkness wrapped in a shroud, holding the bronze bell. "What are you?" Harold roared. There was no answer, only the slow, deliberate rise of the bell. Bong! Harold's body slammed into the floor as if crushed by an invisible weight. His bones snapped like dry twigs from the inside out. He died with a mask of distorted agony frozen on his face. The third morning. 2 days, 2 massacres. Half the village decided to run. They piled into cars, engines roaring as they sped toward the edge of town, but the road simply vanished. A wall of fog swallowed their headlights. GPS screens spiraled into nonsense. As the lead car pushed forward, the pavement ended abruptly. Ahead was nothing but a bottomless black abyss. Raven Hill had become a cage. The final stand. The survivors huddled together in the local school building, barricading the doors. Strength in numbers, they told themselves. The minutes ticked by. Midnight approached. Suddenly, the wind died. Total silence. Then, 3 rapid, deafening tolls. Bong, bong, bong. The school walls groaned. People screamed, clutching one another as the doors locked themselves with a heavy thud. Dark silhouettes began to drift through the glass of the windows, passing through solid matter like smoke. The villagers realized the horrifying truth. The bell was no longer choosing one house at a time. It wanted the entire village. From the heart of the darkness, a whisper drifted through the halls. The reckoning is not yet complete. The night in Raven Hill was just beginning.
Terror was frozen inside the school building. The dark shadows flickering against the window panes stretched slowly, crawling across the floor. Some were weeping, others prayed in hushed tones, while a few stared blankly at the walls. Then, suddenly, the shadows vanished. Silence. The clock struck 1 a.m. The bell did not toll. The villagers stood frozen in shock. It felt as if an invisible force had toyed with them and simply grew bored. But as dawn broke, the news arrived. No one in the school had died. Instead, Samuel, the caretaker of the old cemetery at the edge of town, was found dead. Driven into the dirt beside his grave was a jagged shard of bronze. Next to it, written in blood, "Find me." Secrets of the old church. Emily Harris, a young school teacher, couldn't stay silent any longer. She knew this wasn't just a ghost story. This was history coming alive. She scoured the broken shelves of the old library until she found a charred diary belonging to the town's last priest. The pages read, "The bell is more than just metal. It carries judgment. When the sinners remain silent, the bell speaks." The final page detailed a forbidden ritual.
A century ago, the villagers discovered that the priest was harvesting human souls for power, and the source of that power was the church's massive bronze bell. In their fury, the villagers set the church ablaze, burning the priest alive. But the diary held a final warning. Fire will consume the flesh, but the bell shall endure, and when sin rises again, he shall return. The mark of the curse. Before sunset, Emily headed to the cemetery. She picked up the bronze shard found near Samuel's grave. The moment her skin touched the metal, a deathly chill surged through her. A resonance echoed inside her skull. Visions flashed before her eyes, the church engulfed in flames, the priest's distorted, manic laughter, and amidst the inferno, the bell standing untouched by the heat. She realized then the bell hadn't been destroyed. Its fragments were scattered throughout the village, and every piece held the weight of the curse. The midnight choice. Back in the village, Emily warned the elders, "We have to find every fragment of that bell. If we don't, this will never end." No one believed her, but as night fell, a heavy dread settled over the town. Everyone knew someone else would die tonight. Black clouds choked the sky. The air began to tremble. As the clock neared midnight, the familiar sound drifted through the wind. This time, the sound came from everywhere at once. A crimson, fiery glow erupted from the ruins of the old church in the center of town. From a distance, the villagers saw a figure standing amidst the rubble. He no longer held a handbell. In front of him stood a massive, glowing, blood-red bell. The figure slowly lifted its head. For the first time, two burning eyes flickered within the darkness of its face. A whisper carried on the wind. "Complete me, or I shall complete you all." The bell swung. Ravenhill finally understood. This wasn't just a fight for survival. It was a race to end the curse.
At the stroke of midnight, lightning ripped across the sky. The ruins of the old church glowed in a deep crimson light. There was no fire, yet the stones burned as if something inside them was alive. The villagers stood far away. No one dared to step closer. Emily tightened her grip on the broken piece of bronze and slowly stepped forward. Then, dong! The sound of the bell didn't just shake the ground, it shook the hearts inside every chest. Some villagers dropped to their knees, others clutched their heads in pain. One man's nose began to bleed. And then, in the center of the shattered church, the figure appeared. The souls. Around it, there was no fog. There were shadows, dozens of them, small, tall, men, women. Their faces were blurred, twisted, broken, and from every direction came the sound of distant screams. Emily realized something that froze her blood. These weren't shadows, they were souls, the souls trapped inside the bell. When the figure raised the bell higher, the shadows trembled violently, as if they were begging for freedom. Jake appears. Suddenly, one shadow drifted forward. It stopped right in front of Emily. It was Jake, the Miller family's youngest boy. His face was pale, his eyes completely empty. His lips didn't move, yet a voice echoed in Emily's mind. "Break it, please, set us free." Emily felt the cold of death crawl through her chest. The true curse. Old Martha stepped forward, trembling, her voice cracked like dry wood. 100 years ago, the villagers didn't just kill the priest, they made a deal. Everyone turned to her. The priest said even if he died, the bell would remain, and as long as sin lived in this village, the bell would take souls. So the villagers agreed. Every generation they would give one soul, so the rest could live. Silence fell over Raven Hill. Emily whispered slowly, "So all this time, we've been feeding the curse ourselves?" Martha lowered her head. For the last few years, no one gave the sacrifice, so now it chooses for itself. The night of decision. The figure began walking forward, slowly. With every step, the ground cracked beneath its feet. Then the bell rang again. Dong! Several villagers collapsed instantly, their bodies twisted in agony, and something like smoke began leaving their bodies, being pulled toward the bell. Emily screamed, "No!" She understood the truth now. Collecting the pieces wasn't enough. The bell had to be completely destroyed. But the diary had warned her. Only a soul, freely given, can break the bond of the bell. Emily's mind spun in terror. A willing soul, someone had to give themselves. The figure was only a few steps away now, its burning eyes locked onto Emily. Then it whispered, "You understand now." Suddenly, every trapped soul screamed at once. Lightning tore across the night sky, and the people of Raven Hill finally understood. To break the curse, a price must be paid, a price far deeper than blood. The bell slowly rose again. Dong!
The sound of the bell seemed to tear the sky apart. Dong! The echo didn't just roll across the mountains, it rang inside people's heads. Emily's knees trembled, but she didn't fall. The broken piece of bronze in her hand suddenly began to glow red. All around her, the wandering souls stopped. Then slowly, they turned toward her. Jake, the youngest boy of the Miller family, drifted forward again. His shadow flickered in the cold air. Then a voice echoed inside Emily's mind. Whisper, "Don't be afraid." Emily realized something chilling. These spirits were not completely evil. They were prisoners. Dialogue with darkness. The figure was very close now. Within the folds of its black cloak, countless faces seemed trapped, screaming, crying, begging. Emily raised her voice. "Why are you punishing this village? The sinners died long ago." The figure stopped. Its voice sounded like dry metal scraping together. "Sin does not die. Sin becomes inheritance." The air grew heavy, oppressive. "Your ancestors made a pact in fear. One soul every generation, so the rest could live. But you broke the pact." Emily shouted back, "The pact was unjust. Sacrificing innocent people is the real sin." For a moment, the burning eyes of the figure hesitated. Earth truth revealed. Old Martha stepped forward, crying. Her voice trembled. "We used a lottery every generation to choose one person." Her voice cracked. "My father was the last sacrifice.
After that, we stopped. The villagers stood frozen in horror. All these years, they had survived by sending an innocent soul to die. The figure spoke again. The sacrifices stopped, so now I choose for myself. The bell rose into the air. The souls trembled violently. Emily's decision. Emily closed her eyes for a moment. If a soul had to give itself willingly, could that soul be hers? But suddenly, Jake's spirit drifted closer. He shook his head. No. Break it. Free us all. Then Emily realized something. The pact was built on fear. But what if the village stood together? What if no one stood alone? She shouted, "Everyone, hold hands!" At first, the villagers hesitated. Then slowly, one by one, they joined hands, forming a circle around the ruins of the church. Emily placed the bronze fragment on the ground. Her voice shook, but it was strong. "We will never sacrifice anyone again. If a price must be paid, we will pay it together, not one of us alone." The figure froze. The bell began to rise, then suddenly stopped. The trapped souls screamed all at once. The ground cracked open. Blinding light burst from the earth. The bronze fragment began to melt by itself. The ruins trembled violently. The figure screamed, an inhuman sound of rage. "The pact cannot be broken!" Emily shouted back. "Pacts built on fear must be broken." Suddenly, the bell rang by itself. Dong! But this time, the sound wasn't violent. It sounded like a long, tired sigh. The body of the figure began to crack apart. From inside it, countless streams of light burst upward into the sky. The freed souls. Jake looked at Emily and smiled. Then he faded into the light. The ruins collapsed. The bell shattered on the ground. Silence. The wind returned, and slowly, the first light of dawn rose over Raven Hill. Final horror ending. But far away, from the mountains, a faint echo could still be heard. Very deep, very distant. Tong. Was the curse truly broken, or had it simply changed its form?